This is Tokens. I'm Lee C. Camp.
My wife and I had lived in Franklin. There was just nothing to challenge our belief system or ourselves as people.
That's Marty Dodson, a long-tenured and well-established Nashville songwriter. He's describing a decision he and his wife made in 2016 to leave the suburbs.
Everybody around us thought like us, was in the same economic bracket, and white.
Marty and his wife moved. They relocated to a house just across the street from someone with a different history than them, Stephanie Knight.
My great-grandmother, she bought that house. It was like 4 families of us living in that 2-bedroom house. And she bought that house when I was 8. So we've lived there about 50-some-odd years now, 57, I believe it is.
Upon Marty's moving into the neighborhood, he and Stephanie became fast friends. Then, in 2020, came the coronavirus lockdown, and then came the murder of George Floyd.
Candy and I were walking our dog. Stephanie was sitting on her porch, and, we waved and said, "How are you doing?" And she said, "I'm scared for my boys."
I have 3 sons, and you just want them to come home.
That sidewalk conversation led to more conversation, and then it led to Marty inviting Stephanie to share in doing what Marty and Nashville often do, write a song about things that matter. And so they did. The song and more on the story behind the song coming right up.
Hey, this is Jacob Lewis, the editor of the show. I just wanted to chime in real quick before we got started and say there were some technical difficulties with Lee's mic on this episode, but as always, the conversation is still very much worth listening to. Thanks for your understanding, and enjoy this episode.
I'm Marty Dodson. I'm a songwriter. I teach songwriting, and I've had 10 number ones, some things with Kenny Chesney, Carrie Underwood, George Strait, Joe Cocker, Billy Currington, all kinds of...
All those little names.
All those little names all over the spectrum. But I've been really blessed to do something that I love, so I feel really grateful to get to do that. Well, I've been songwriting since I was 11, but professionally I've done it for about 25 years. I was a youth minister for a while and then kind of had an early midlife crisis and realized that that's not really what I set out to do. And I figured out if I could have done anything I wanted to do, I would have been a songwriter. So I started chasing that a little bit later in life. I try to really write things that my grandchildren and my great-grandchildren are going to be able to look back and go, he was trying to make the world a better place with his music. As I've gone on in my career, I've realized what a responsibility it is to have a microphone or to be putting the words in the person's mouth that has the microphone. And so I feel very responsible with that to try to make the world a better place.
And when you think about what are some of your favorite songs, are some of your favorite songs still not yet recorded, or have most of your favorite songs already been recorded?
No, it's funny. My first big hit was a song called While You Loved Me by Rascal Flatts. And the day I demoed that song, I demoed 5 songs, and that was my least favorite of the 5. And the other 4 never got recorded. So I don't think I'm a very good judge of what's going to get recorded. But yeah, I've written I think I've demoed 10,000 plus songs.
Wow.
And I've had 130 recorded. So the percentage is not good. I don't even like to think about what that percentage is.
It's a great picture, though, to think about. Because I think, Emily Dickinson, I think she wrote 10,000 poems, but only maybe had like 7 published in her lifetime.
Sorry, that was something like a preacher count. But the point remains the same. She actually wrote close to 1,800 poems and only had 10 known poems published in her lifetime.
And so the hard work of doing good art and the patience that's required to be reminded of the realities of doing the hard work.
Yeah, I think the 9,000 that didn't get recorded got me to the 135 that did, perhaps.
Stephanie Knight. Live in East Nashville. Been living there for some 50 some odd years. Graduated high school in Stratford High School. Go Spartans. I have 3 sons, James, Gennaro, and Ezekiel. I love my biblical names, as you can tell. My mother is still alive, and my dad is a minister, a pastor, known all over, Dr. Amos Jones Jr.
I think you said the house you live in now, you were raised in?
Yes, we moved to my great-grandmother. She bought that house. It was like 4 families of us living in that 2-bedroom house. And she bought that house when I was 8. So we've lived there about 50 some odd years now, 57, I believe it is. And she's gone on to glory, of course. So I've lived away from the home, but I'm there now. And like I stated earlier, I've been blessed to have the home that I didn't pay for, you know. And I try to do really well by it.
Yeah.
You know, I do. The church that I attend, that I'm a member of, is in the North Nashville area. And that's where I grew up at, too. You know, I was in my mother's womb. And that's where I've been all
these years.
All of my life.
What are some of your earliest memories from church as a child?
Oh, my gosh. We had some awesome things going on in our church. We would have our study lessons. And then after the study lessons, we used to have little quartets where the kids would have a group, and we all would have make up names of our groups, and we would sing and perform. So, you know, it was awesome. But TV gospel time, that was amazing. We had an imagination. We have the choir stand, and we'd put this big white sheet over like a TV and cut it out like a TV screen, and we have a Christmas tree wheel, color wheel. We would all perform the different choirs and soloists and things like this, and we would take on names like Mahalia Jackson. You know, I might be Mahalia, and so forth and so on. So those were awesome memories.
Good memories.
Yes, yes. We had to depend on Christ. We had to believe and know that he was going to make a way in our circumstances, because I had no idea I was poor because we always had what we needed. So church or going to the edifice to worship was essential. It was something that we did because we had to give honor to whom all blessings flow.
Whatsoever years may bring, if our earthly friends more closely to him clean.
My wife and I lived in Franklin.
Back to songwriter Marty Dodson.
There's a couple reasons we moved. One was every time we went out to eat, we found ourselves in East Nashville because there were so many great little local restaurants. But the other reason was we felt like the area we lived in was just very homogenous. There was just nothing to challenge our belief system or ourselves as people. You know, it was just kind of everybody around us thought like us, was in the same economic bracket, and white, you know. And we wanted to be in an environment where we would be challenged a little bit more to grow as people. And so that led us to move to East Nashville. And when we moved, I believe we were minorities on the street, you know, when we moved in.
Stephanie, do you remember Marty moving in across the street?
I don't remember the exact day. I just remember that before they moved in, they were examining the house to determine if they wanted to buy the house and what have you. And I'm just a people person, I guess you could say. And I'm a person that I enjoy knowing who is around me because, like I said, I grew up there from 8 years old. I've been in every house. I've seen all kinds of changes and gentrifications and da-da-da-da-da. So when I started to see that things were about to just explode here, I said, well, we've got to live together. I don't meet strangers. So when I saw Marty and Candy, I didn't know them, but I went straight over there. Hi, my name is Miss Stephanie. Are you going to move in? And they were saying they're thinking about it, et cetera, et cetera. Well, I've been right here on this corner for 50-something years, and I'm not going anywhere until they roll me out on a gurney. So, it's just, we got to live together. And Marty was the most soft-spokenest person. I said, what you say, baby? He's such a humble spirit, and I loved it. And I said, thank you, Lord, for good neighbors. And it's been that way ever since. We don't impose on one another or anything like that, but we're there for one another if we need to be.
So you raised the issue of gentrification. How have you experienced, or how do you process or think about the realities of gentrification?
It is what it is, Nothing stays the same. When our family moved in, it was mainly white. That's when I was 8 years old. It was fading in. We were fading into the neighborhood. Bam! All of a sudden, now everything around is. So it's often been a change here. I've seen every change there could be in that neighborhood. Like I said, I've been in every house that hasn't been torn down. I've been in it, and I babysat in it, et cetera, et cetera. So when this came about, I was afraid because, like I stated, my great-grandmother purchased that house with little or nothing as a maid, as a housekeeper in white folks' homes, So I didn't want that to be taken from us because, again, 4 families of people lived in that house at one time. And you would wonder, where did everybody sleep? Well, God makes a way, Everybody was comfortable. But my point is that I just didn't want that to be taken because there's a history there. There are memories. And I can remember my great-grandmother the first time she asked me to fix her a cup of coffee. I thought I'd died and gone to heaven. So all of that, with that being said, the gentrification, it looks good, it is good, change comes, and you got to roll with the punches. But the most important thing about it for me is that we have to live together.
When we moved in too, one of our concerns was we'd never lived in an area where we were minorities, and we were concerned that the neighbors would resent us being there. And so Stephanie coming over, taking that initiative was a huge factor in us going, okay, we got Stephanie, she's got our back if we do this. And, we have experienced a little bit of resentment from some other people here and there, or coldness maybe, but Stephanie's just been a solid rock of somebody we could go to. We had someone throw a rock through our window one Christmas. And,
I didn't know nothing about that. I would have to fuss at somebody.
Yeah. And, so there's some things we've experienced like that, but it was just such a comfort to have somebody that had been there for that long that would come over and take the initiative to welcome us. And we found out later that we took the house that used to be there, her son mowed their grass, so we took his job away, mowing the grass and some things like that, but it's just been a real blessing to have her there.
What are other things that you've learned or seen, discovered in this process?
I think, like Stephanie was saying, I think a real desire to try to understand each other and each other's experiences better. Responsibility to have compassion.
early 2020, March 2020, COVID begins. Pandemic rolls into the U.S., lockdowns, and then May 25 of 2020, George Floyd is murdered. And you see each other on the street shortly thereafter?
Yeah, the way I remember it, Candy and I were walking our dog. Stephanie was sitting on her porch, and, we waved and said, "How are you doing?" And she said, "I'm scared for my boys." And she came out, and we socially distanced and just talked in the street for 45 minutes, and we all cried.
That was a period where, I have 3 sons, and you just want them to come home. At this time, you have us killing each other, and then you have some portions of law killing us, and you just want your child to come home. And I've tried to instill in my children to do unto others, to treat people the way you want to be treated. But sometimes that doesn't always work out. Regardless, you can still do unto others, and you still come out on the short end. So this is the life that we're living, And Marty and I was just talking, and he was asking me questions, and I was just trying to give him the most honest answers I could, knowing that this was hard, to see someone murdered like this, knowing that it could be any one of my sons at any given time. That was scary. That's really frightening. And I could feel his genuine concern and his curiosity, because he said, "I've never had to experience that." That made me feel so, I'm going, golly. He said he's never had to experience anything like that with his children. And that's awesome that you have it. But it's unfortunate that any of us should have to experience it. Knowing me, because I get to crying, because I'm expressing all of the things that Marty is trying to express it, and it gets emotional for me. But anyway, we were just talking, and he asked me various questions about raising Black boys, what it's like to do that, and what my struggles were. What kind of struggles do you experience in that? And again, just knowing that you want them to come home. Before all of this occurred, and I was in the house just piddling around and straightening the house. And this was like 4 years ago, okay? And I said, "Lord, I wish Marty would write me a song."
I didn't know that.
Yeah, I did. Never having any inkling that I just planted a seed. And I just went on by my business, never thinking nothing else about it. And then here comes Marty asking me about, the situation with George Floyd and all of this Black Lives Matters thing and so forth. And we're talking out in the yard, in the street. And the next thing I know, Marty calls me. He said, "Write some things down, if you would." And after doing that, then he said, "I want you to listen to something." And he sang this song, and it was so beautiful. And his voice was so tranquil. I'm going, oh my God, that is touching my spirit. When my boy walks out the door, I am never really sure that he is coming back to me. that he's coming back to me. Black mother, oh, black mother, we have cried these tears too long. Black mother, oh, black mothers, Lord, please help us carry on. Lord, help us carry on.
You're listening to Tokens, Public Theology, Human Flourishing, and the Good Life. We're most grateful to have you joining us. If you've not yet done so, subscribe today to the Tokens podcast on Apple, Spotify, Stitcher, CastBox, or wherever you get your favorite podcasts. We do love hearing from you and are always pleased to hear some of the things you'd like to hear more about. You can email us at podcast@tokenshow.com. Also, remember you can sign up for our email list or find out how to join us for a live event, all at tokenshow.com. Lots of wonderful opportunities for you to join us, and we would be delighted to see you. Again, learn more at tokenshow.com.
These tears too long. Black mothers, oh, black mothers.
This is our interview with Stephanie Knight and Marty Dodson. Coming up, we'll hear more from Marty and Stephanie about the hard conversations and practicing of compassion which led to their song, Black Mothers. Part 2 in just a moment. Welcome back to Tokens and our interview with Stephanie Knight and Marty Dodson.
So, raised a white boy in Alabama in a small town, we certainly were very aware of racial dynamics. Our town was pretty much, at least my high school, half black, half white, and relatively recently integrated. Early 70s was integrated. I ended up being a high school student in the 80s. And so you think, as a white boy, middle-class white boy, that you at least understand some things about racial dynamics raised in a context like that. And then I guess in seminary, I started reading a lot of Martin Luther King Jr. and learning a lot more about the civil rights movement, being moved by the power of King and Reverend Lawson and so many others in their commitments to nonviolence, grounded in their understanding of Christian discipleship. And so being fascinated with that, learning a lot about that. I think sometime in the last decade, I was at a conference, Catalina Island off the coast of California, and I was having dinner one night with a black pastor in one of the largest churches in Houston, a highly respected man. And somehow we got started talking about what his experience was like raising his sons. And he told me, he said, my boys are in their 20s, but they don't hardly ever leave the house without me telling them, if you get stopped by the police, be respectful, don't sass, and this is how you got to behave. And I think that was one of those moments where I realized how little I understood about racial dynamics. Because here's this man, he's having to do this, every time his kids go out. And I was completely oblivious to that reality.
Absolutely what the pastor said, having to make that mention of make sure that if you do this, if something happens, you keep yourself in order, you do what you're supposed to do what's asked of you. I've really not had any bad experiences as far as police and things like that. To tell the truth about it, they've been pretty good. But the idea of the fear of what could happen and what has happened in other persons' families, that I knew of, I just constantly have to remind them, keep your attitude in check. Even though you're right about something and you're being accused of something or whatever, should that happen, just be obedient. Remember to do what's right. I just tried to make sure that I had them to understand, come home, do what you're supposed to do, keep your hands where you can be seen, etc. And it's unfortunate that we have to experience that. It really is. That this is something that an African American has to go through day after day after day, only because of the color of your skin.
I think the story you told me about one of your boys going to get a cold drink one night. Too,
Absolutely. Absolutely. This was just not long ago where my baby boy had gone across. There's a neighbor that has a vending machine, and they have sodas and things that they sell out of. And so he had gone to get a soda. And this was at dark. So when he came back from the soda machine, he went back to the deck and was sitting on the deck talking to his female friend. Someone called the police, and I was asleep. And that motherly instinct woke me up. Nothing, no sound or anything, but just something woke me up. I called him. I said, what are you doing? And he said, talking to the police. I said, talking to the police? I hung the phone up, got up out of bed, and went out. And there is this robust officer standing on my deck, and I'm going, what's the matter? Well, he says he got a call saying that someone was prowling in the back here. I said, well, this is my son, and he lives here. And I do respect and understand why someone could have easily mistook him. But on the other end, this could have turned out way worse than it actually was, because this younger son, he's a humbled person, but he has a temper. He could, we all got all of that. But my point is that I still have to talk to him about, hey, you don't buck up against authority. You respect authority. No matter what, you still respect authority. And he was, well, Mama, I didn't do nothing wrong. I was in my own yard and everything. He come up and hear the police come up in the yard. But son, it was a mistake that anybody could have made. And they were really looking out for us. But it just could have been escalated into something that could have been way more severe. But again, I'm just grateful that I've never had to be called and say, your son is, I've been blessed, but it's so many unfortunate ones.
When my son would go out, I would say, if you have trouble, call the police. And Stephanie's talking to her boys about be cautious around the police, And I think, too, one of the things that really struck me from that conversation was when I saw the George Floyd incident, I was appalled and horrified as a human to see that happen. But I never one time thought about my son. It didn't connect to being afraid that would happen to my son. There was no thought at all about that. And so when we had this conversation, I thought, well, that's the disconnect I need to understand, is because it could be my son. It's less likely to be my son, unfortunately, in the world we live in, but I need to understand what it feels like to worry that would be my son. One thing Stephanie said was, we've just cried these tears too long. And, most of the stuff in the song, the things she said to me, I just put them in order and made them rhyme and put them to music. But that idea to me is the central thing of it. Is just, how long are Black mothers going to have to cry these tears and have the fear of, I would fear that my son might get in an auto accident and not come home when he would go out. But I would never recall fearing that someone would kill him, or beat him up. I mean, that wasn't my experience of that was a real possibility in in my life, So that to me was the central idea of the song, is just asking the question of how long are these tears going to have to fall before something changes?
What he said, how long? How long? That sounds like what, Ezra? How long, Lord? The words that he had written, they were really real. Because when you listen to the lyrics of the song, I said, gosh, he just wrote down every Black mothers, but even mothers, period, that have had to experience. It's not, we won't just put it in a category, but of Black mothers. It could be any mother that has experienced the child being murdered in some horrific way. That's hard. That's a hard thing. But for Black mothers, quote unquote, I guess you could say, it was just so real to hear those words saying, when my boy walks out the door, I'm not sure if he's going to come back. And that's a reality for African American mothers. And the mother has to endure that type of burden constantly. So you got to know yourself a higher power that's going to enable you to go through that, to deal with that on a daily basis.
With the, you're in the middle of COVID, how'd you end up writing the song together?
I asked Stephanie to email me stories, so she would email me stories and thoughts about it. And then I began to put it together and put it to music, and I'd send her little snippets of, what do you think about this? And we'd email back and forth or holler across the street. And she wound up singing it in her phone because we didn't want to put anybody at risk to go to a studio or anything. So I taught her how to sing it into her phone, and I sent it to an engineer. So it was all recorded and done remotely.
So is what we hear in the recording what was recorded on the phone?
Mm-hmm.
Wow. Huh.
When my boy walks out the door, I am never really sure that he is coming back to me, that he's coming back to me. Black mother, oh, Black mother, we have cried these tears too long. Black mother, oh, Black mothers, Lord, please help us carry on. Lord, help us carry on. How can I make him understand? He's no less than any man. When other voices drag him down, other voices drag him down. Black mothers, oh, Black mothers, we have cried help us carry on. Lord, please help us carry on. Isn't that amazing?
Impressive.
I'm going, gosh, this is really unique. I was blown away myself, you know. I was amazed with God because I'm going, you had this in the works all along. These persons, Marty and Candy, I believe that with all of my heart, that they were purposed to live across the street from me. And I think that their purpose is to help bring us all together because all of my neighbors, they know Miss Stephanie. You can believe that. I may not know their names, but I know their faces and their dogs. But we're neighbors. We're neighbors now, you know, and we're cordial neighbors. We're friendly with each other, you know. We've gotten to be a small family, if you would say, because we don't have any hostilities. There's no discomfort about, you know, this kind of race. It's just friendly to me. That's just me. I just believe that God doesn't make mistakes. And I don't want to get on a religious kick, but he knows his business and he is trying to bring his people together. When my boy walks out the door, I am never really sure that he is coming back to me, that he's coming back to me. Black mothers, oh, black mothers, we have cried these tears too long. Black mothers, oh, black mothers, Lord help us to carry on. Help us carry on.
Amen. Thank you. We've been talking to Miss Stephanie Knight on her new song, Black Mothers, written with her neighbor, Nashville songwriter Mr. Marty Dodson. Thank you so much, Stephanie. Thank you, Marty.
Thank you for having me.
us.
You've been listening to Tokens, Public Theology, Human Flourishing, and the Good Life. If you'd like to hear another story like this one, then check out our recent episode with Ruby Amanfu, Matt Maher, and Lee Nash, in which they discussed the vulnerability and honesty which led to their song entitled Good Trouble. Remember, you can subscribe to our podcast on Apple, Spotify, Stitcher, CastBox, or wherever you get your favorite podcasts. We'd be most appreciative if you'd go over there and give us one of those glowing 5-star reviews, because that helps get our podcast out to more folks. Got feedback? We'd love to hear from you. Email us, text, or attach a voice memo, and send to the address podcast@tokenshow.com. Our thanks to all the stellar team that makes this podcast possible. Executive producer and manager Christy Bragg of Bragg Management, co-producer Jacob Lewis of Great Feeling Studios, associate producers Ashley Bain, Tom Anderson, and Brad Perry, engineer Carrie Harmon, music beds by Zach and Maggie White and Blue Dot Sessions, and the live performance of Hold On to God's Unchanging Hand, taped on one of our live shows by our friends the Settles Connection, along with the most outstanding Horeb Mountain Boys. And since it's such a great song, I think we'll just let this one run on out to the end.
Trust in him. Whatsoever years may bring. If I hurt, please more closely to him clean. We gotta hold to his hand, to God's unchanging hand. You ought to hold to his hands, my God's unchanging hand. Then you can build your hopes on things eternal. If you just hold on. We're living in troubled times. You need to hold on. Hold on to God's unchanging hand. Oh yeah. Hold on. You got to hold on. Hold on. You better hold on. You better hold on. Don't you get weary. You got to hold on. You better hold on.
Thanks for listening, and peace be unto thee. The Tokens Podcast is a production of Tokens Media, LLC, and
Great Feeling Studios.